Broadcasting from beautiful, tropical Vero Beach, Florida, it's Money Nation with Ed Gardner.
Good morning and welcome to Money Nation. Today's special guest is Meredith Chimento. Meredith is the Executive Director of Early Care and Learning Council in Albany, New York. Meredith, thanks for being with us.
Hi, Ed. Thank you very much for having me.
Meredith, a lot of people, look at childcare as a cost center. And after talking to you, I think it's much different, actually. There's a lot in going to childcare you can tell us about that actually it can be a profit center, if that's not the right words, but inform us and enlighten us about childcare, because a lot of people, have a certain view of that. Is there a return for investment in childcare? I guess that's my first question.
Yeah, absolutely. Studies nationwide are really looking at that there's a $7.30 return on every dollar invested in education. And you can look at that a variety of different ways. You can look at it as far as long-term workforce development. So we're taking our youngest children, turning them into active learners so that they're productive members of society and the future workforce. But you can also look at childcare as really the infrastructure or the backbone to the economy. When the COVID pandemic occurred and every business shut down, childcare stayed open so that essential workers could continue serving their communities and so that businesses could open back up. We see that in communities where there's really strong childcare programs, home values actually go up. And I believe it's about $13. Increased property values are increased by $13 for every dollar invested in local childcare programs.
Interesting. What else does your council do? Early care? Is it just for infants and little kids? Tell us a little bit more about exactly what you guys do too.
Sure, absolutely. So in New York State, I work for the Early Care and Learning Council. We're a statewide nonprofit, and we are the membership organization for 35 child care resource and referral agencies. And this model exists throughout the country. You will find them in almost every state in the United States, but they are in Hawaii, they're in Alaska, they're in Florida, they're in California. Every state has a little bit of a different model, but what the child care resource and referral agencies do are really three things. They help parents find accessible, quality, affordable early education. So if you're a new mom or dad listening to this podcast and you're having a baby or you're looking for child care, you can call your local child care resource and referral agency and we'll help you find childcare. We'll tell you what to look for in quality childcare, and that not all childcare is equal, but will help with the linguistic needs that you have, if you have staff that are shift workers, help you locate childcare that operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We can really navigate that for new parents and for businesses. The second piece that we do is we make sure that childcare is not babysitting. So it's really creating a system comparable to the K-12 public school education system. So we are hiring and working with qualified teachers with master's degrees or associate's degrees, or what we call a child development CDA, which is basically a credential. But we're ensuring that the quality of program throughout the state and throughout the country is high quality. So your children are safe, secure, but also learning. They hit the ground running. The majority of brain development happens between the ages of 0 to 3. So this is the time to not sit them in front of a television in a safe place with a family member, but to really invest in high quality early education and place your child in that if you can. The third thing that CCR&Rs do is we advocate. So I lobby for money. I lobby for money for from the state and from the federal government to fund child care so that working families can afford to pay for care. The average cost of child care in New York State is $16,000 for an infant. You have 9 months to save if you're lucky. Kind of hard for most people to come up with $16,000 a year. So we help try to make child care affordable. And we work on different policies and practices to really look at that public-private partnership so that businesses, the state, the federal government are all investing in care, just as we do in the K-12 system.
Very interesting. Meredith, if all children were enrolled in early care globally, what would happen in your opinion?
Oh, imagine what a wonderful world it would be. But the true part of it is the economy would boom. It would add $3 trillion to the global economy. If we met the needs of every child under the age of 5 that needs childcare on every continent, we would add 43 million jobs worldwide. What happens now is that there's an annual cost of $122 billion in lost earnings due to the shortage of just infants and toddlers. So that's 0 to 3. Imagine the 4 and 5-year-olds that miss out, and the kids that are in school that need before and after school care. Parents can't go to work because they don't have childcare, and that's a significant impact on the economy and on businesses.
That's pretty amazing. What is the impact on families?
Well, it gets pretty tricky, in my opinion. What happens with families is they can't go to work. They cannot really focus on their jobs because they're worried about where their children are, and they lose out on revenue. They lose out on income, excuse me. Working parents lose over $5,000 a year or lower earnings, reduced productivity at work, and they have job search expenses because they lose their jobs. So for people that really employ manufacturing positions, shift workers, direct service organizations or businesses, parents can't just leave. Some people are afforded the luxury of having a job where they might be able to leave and work from home, but that's not the majority of the United States. That's not the majority of the businesses that operate in the States. And so businesses are losing revenue. Our tax base is decreasing. And it's just contributing to really some of the compounding impacts in the economy at this time because there's not enough care.
Yeah, I'm telling you, those are all good, really good points. You know, you look at people, typically parents take care of their kids or they get their grandma or uncle, but what is the role of business in supporting access to childcare? Because like you said before, it can really help business. It can help revenues. What is the role in business in supporting access to childcare?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think the first step really is to take a look at and recognize that when businesses work together with childcare programs, with economic councils, with IDAs, with any business development entity in their community, and have a strong childcare platform, they can recruit. You can recruit employees that are really looking to settle down. It is very challenging to have manufacturing companies, tech companies, all of these things that really require a strong workforce, but there's no place for their kids to go. So there's constant turnover is what we see. People come into a community and they leave because they're not able to find childcare for their businesses. So what we've seen, and an example in New York State, is Corning Incorporated. They invest in childcare. They actually subsidize childcare slots, which is a space for a child, so that their employees can put their child in care. And they actually, what Corning's done in the community, this is a company in the middle part of New York State. What they've done is they really are paying attention to the community as a whole, thinking about the young parents in their communities are potential workers for them as well. So they've invested, they contribute sizable amount of money to childcare in their community because they recognize that there's productivity losses when there's childcare constraints, and that there's benefit losses, that there's costs associated that they have to pay to their employees when they are not working. So employees are using sick time and personal time and vacation time rather than hopping on a line.
Makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
Listen, are there a lot of other companies like Corning that offer that, or is it just for the really big companies like Google and Exxon, or what do you see? What kind of companies provide
Yeah.
this?
So it is typically the bigger corporations that can fund childcare. It's harder to do. It is an investment, of course. It's an investment in your workforce. Regeneron, a large chemical manufacturing, pharmaceutical manufacturing company, again, does this. But you can see things like Cummins Diesel will do this around the country. They are developing childcare centers to help support their families. But small businesses can do it too. Small businesses can do a few different things. They can compensate their employees by offering a small stipend to help offset the cost of childcare. And we see a lot of small business doing that. It's a stipend. It helps them. They get $100 a week, and they're able to pay for it supports the cost of care. We see that. I think what the most exciting part for me is to see economic development really have childcare as a fabric or foundation of some of their investments. And so what we're seeing in New York State is that some of the regional economic development councils, or all of the regional economic development councils, have prioritized childcare. And that means that in some of the investments that they're making in their communities, there needs to be a childcare component, because they see that childcare and business development go hand in hand.
Makes a lot of sense. I think if you're a big business or any type of business, you think that would really help your business, because like you said, people missing work, people staying home with a sick kid, it hurts your business. So it makes a lot of sense, Meredith. Would you see the U.S. and the world different? Have you looked at how are the child care programs in other parts of the world versus U.S.?
Sure, absolutely. That's a great question. So Quebec City, for example, Quebec City has universal child care. And what that means is that no family pays more than 7 to 10% of their income on child care. So it's almost like public school education. And the benefits that Quebec is seeing are immense. Their employees do not miss work. Kids are guaranteed a place in an early education center. And there's, surveys that we've read where there's just overall happiness and a balance that occurs with the businesses, and they've seen an incredible return on investment. So Quebec is one example of that, and I know that many of the European countries also invest in early education, so that it's just part of the continuum of public school. We are moving that way in many states around the United States. Different states have really focused on this universal child care. And New York State is making strong strides toward that.
I was going to ask you that if it's different in per states. And also, we're talking private companies. How about the public? Does the government have any child care for certain people as well, or is it all private based?
No, so the government actually runs an incredible military. They will offer child care for their active members of the military. And so there's a great program where the federal government requires that these child care programs on the military base operate at the highest level. They have to have a star ranking, or what we call a quality rated improvement system ranking, to ensure that our kids are taken care of while their parents are doing the most dangerous jobs. So that's one of the incredible initiatives of the federal government that has been around for a very long time. The federal government also just invests in childcare through the Child Care Development Block Grant. Block grants fund a lot of different things in our economy. CCDBG is the money that the feds put into state budgets, and then the states use that money to invest in childcare. An example, again, in New York State, or in any state, is that the money comes from the CCDF, the fund, and then that money is used to support subsidies for working families. Again, as I referenced, the cost of childcare throughout the country is extraordinarily expensive, typically more than a public school education. And so the federal government for many years has invested in this.
Interesting. Meredith, we're going to take a quick break here. Remember, listeners, any questions at all, you can always feel free to give me a call at 518-255-8854. We'll be right back with Money Nation.
All opinions expressed by Ed Gardner and or his guests on the Money Nation show are solely Ed Gardner's and or his guests' opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Cutter & Company or any of their affiliates. You should not treat any opinion expressed by Ed Gardner and or guests as a specific inducement to make a particular investment or follow a particular strategy, but only in as an expression of their opinion. Ed Gardner's and his guests' opinions are based on information he considers reliable, but neither Cutter & Company nor affiliates and or subsidies warrant its completeness or accuracy, and it should not be relied upon as such. Always talk to your financial advisor before making such decisions.
Welcome back to Money Nation. So, Meredith, I remember seeing on CNBC a while back, maybe 6 months ago, Ken Griffin from Citadel was on TV, and I think it was something to do with early child care and learning. And I looked back at some information on Ken. Everyone knows who Ken is, but I didn't really know he was so active in fundraising and giving for schools and early care. And, he's been doing it since back in 2009. But I think you went to the Rainbow Foundation in New York City when Ken was there. Did you get to sit with him? Did you get to sit with him at the
I was
Robin
right
Hood?
up front, Ed. Yeah, I was at the front with the mayor of New York City, and absolutely. I was there. It was the Robin Hood Gala, where it is obviously an incredible. Robin Hood is an incredible organization that has very strong ties to the financial community. And I was there where 2 seats on Blue Horizon were auctioned off. And he donated $8 million to this cause, to the Fund for Early Learning through Robin Hood. And he actually gave up his seat. It was for 2 seats, and donated them back to 2 early educators based out of New York City.
Wow.
I think he understands the importance.
He gave someone a ride to space. Wow, that's amazing.
He gave 2 people a ride to space, actually.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, I was looking back in 2009, he gave $10 million to a multi-year study. He's given money to preschool programs in Chicago and funded classes of schools. And, he's an interesting guy. And when I was looking this stuff up, I noticed that he was from Daytona Beach, not a little further north from Vero Beach, where the radio show is here. And he grew up in Boca. But one of the interesting things I saw about him, Meredith, was when he was in high school, guess what he did? He was the president of the math class, which I thought, okay, so he's little, smart guy with the mathematics. And he also had a little software business in high school. He ran a software business out of his bedroom. So, I get a lot of questions all the time. People are like, how do you get into Wall Street? How do you get a job in Wall Street? And actually, I have another friend of mine who also was a director at Citadel. He was a math genius as well, went to MIT. So I think we have to give advice. If anyone wants to get into Wall Street, learn your math, be a mathematics, because that's what it seems like. The Wall Street guys, they want smart math guys down there.
And we teach that at the earliest stage in early education centers. If you wait to start to learn these things, and I think that's what he realizes, is that, as I referenced before, brain development, it starts the moment we emerge, and that constant rapid fire growth of cells occurs until they're 3. And then it starts to slow down. So what they say is that you learn to read and learn to do math in up to 3rd grade. And then after 3rd grade, you're reading to learn. So you have to lay that framework and that solid foundation for education at the earliest stages. And that's what he recognizes, is that those long-term investments in Head Start, in pre-K, in the inner cities, is really allowing us the opportunity to position our future leaders for success. It has to start from the beginning. That's what other countries are doing that make them so successful. And the US needs to get behind that.
Well, there's a note to all of our listeners. If you want to be in Wall Street, or you want your kids to be in Wall Street, take mathematics. That's what, forget economics or forget finance. Go mathematics, because I guess, Wall Street wants smart people, good with numbers. Interesting
Absolutely.
stuff. Why don't you tell us a little bit what's happening in New York State, even though we're a nationwide audience here? I'm sure a lot of other states have similar things. So tell us what's going on with New York State.
Yeah, New York's
the child care desert. We talked about that, or
Yeah. New York's not, dissimilar from any other state. There's large cities, there's suburban populations, and there's very rural areas. And it's all the same. There's just a lack of childcare providers in the state right now. They do not earn enough to make it a lucrative business, to make people want to enter the field. Minimum wage is increasing across the country. That's great. But sometimes fast food pays more than the people that are educating your children earn. And so what is happening in New York State, because of some federal dollar investments, is there's been an initiative to address childcare deserts. Many of you have probably heard of food deserts. Typically occurs in city centers where there is not a supermarket, a place for the population to buy groceries. It's the same for childcare deserts. There's just not enough care for the number of children under a specific age. And when I had my first daughter, I had to drive an hour and 5 minutes to find licensed care in my community. And I live near Albany, New York, the capital. So what is happening is there's investments in trying to increase the number of slots, which we've been successful with. There has been federal and state investments. And this childcare deserts project is occurring across the country. We're increasing slots, but there's not enough people that are willing to go into the workforce. And that's why there's still a shortage and wait lists, and why people are waiting in New York 2 years for their infant. Understand the disparity there, to enter into childcare. They can't find a place for their kids.
How do we get the salaries up more for these businesses? How do we do that?
Yeah, so a couple different things. I think I equate it often to nursing, where there was a revolution of the nursing profession, where people really understood that it was a profession that works hand in hand in the medical community. That's occurring with education. It's power to our profession, recognizing that educators, many of them have master's degrees, like a public school teacher, and should be compensated at that same rate and earn a living wage. So there are initiatives, but there's not enough tax dollars in the world to really fund all of this. We think that there's $1 billion that could be invested in New York State to give every educator a $12,500 annual bump. But it's $1 billion, and there's a lot of things that we need to do with $1 billion. And that's why that public-private partnership is so important until our country moves toward universal childcare. Businesses have to recognize that it behooves them to invest in childcare for their current workforce and the development of their workforce. And the federal government and the state government need to continue to prioritize childcare and pay the workers a fair living wage.
Yeah,
Gets them off the courts. Oh,
Exactly.
sorry, Ed, but it gets them up. I mean, I think the thing to recognize is that gets at many early educators throughout the country right now qualify for supports, WIC, housing assistance, heat, food assistance. If we invested in them, they would come off of that, and the return on investment would be so much higher.
Great point. I agree with you. You know, as getting ready for this interview today on the radio, I got a email from a friend of mine up at the northern end of Lake George. My friend Donna. She is, I know her from sailing, racing sailboats for 30 years. She's been a sailor, and she does race committee, but she is involved with early care. I just got an email today about in Ticonderoga, and they are, and maybe is that part of the desert there? Do you know, Donna, or did you get a chance to read the email? I did forward it to you at all.
I did read the email. I don't know Donna, but love the sailing community on Lake George. What Donna's really recognizing is, or what they know, is that Ticonderoga is a desert. There's really very few licensed and regulated childcare programs in the North Country. The North Country is the Adirondacks in New York State. There are typically more moose than people and more moose than childcare programs. And that sits for the northern end of Lake George, where there is the framework for manufacturing, for new businesses to come in, to purchase land, to do wonderful things in the community, employ lots of people, but there's no childcare. And so Donna is really looking to make that case to let people know and let these investors understand that by investing in childcare, the long-term economic growth for the community will be realized.
Would that be would the town of Ticonderoga do that, or would that be bringing in people to start a childcare business? Do you know what she's trying to do?
No, typically they're
Either one.
private run
Private
childcare programs. But what we do see is that town and state and federal legislators that serve that region can put money toward child care programs. So they'll need a blend. They'll need money from the state. They'll need money from Elise Stefanik to invest in child care. They'll need people from all over to really build a system. There are not a lot of children in that region that can support a large center. And what we would really promote and suggest is the use of group family and family childcare, which is where family members, parents, operate childcare programs out of their homes. That's where the majority of actual childcare takes place.
Interesting. I got a little quiz question for you. I know that you spend time in Lake George in beautiful upstate New York, beautiful Lake George. The question is, because a lot of our listeners may don't even know where Ticonderoga is. It's at the north end of Lake George, up in the Adirondacks. But my question to you is, what is Ticonderoga most famous for?
That is a really interesting question that I don't know. The Battle of Ticonderoga. Are we talking about French and New Moore?
There you go. You're
okay.
right. There's, people say the pencil, the Ticonderoga pencil. What's that?
I was going to say good ice cream, maybe good boating. The mountains aren't as beautiful as the central part of Lake George, for those of you, the listeners that are listening. But it would be a historic battle.
It is the battle, and they've had several battles, because that was the capture of the Fort Ticonderoga by America was the first American win in the Revolutionary War. So that was the first victory for the Revolutionary troops when they took that fort from Britain. Later on, earlier, Britain and France was a French fort at one time, and it stopped the flow of goods from New York City to Canada, up Lake George, up to Lake Champlain. But a lot of people say pencil is the famous. They do make pencils there. They mine for graphite there. But interesting place, and hopefully the Donna will give her the best of luck for Donna, and hopefully she does well and brings that in, because that's a growing little town up in Lake George. Meredith, thank you very much for being with us. Really appreciate it. We'll have to check in the future and see what's going on, and seeing how you're really helping families, helping kids, helping businesses. Really, really interesting what you're doing. And thanks for being on the show today.
Thanks, Ed, for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity anytime to talk about the economic impact that supporting childcare has on our economy. I think you can't turn on the news without hearing about the childcare crisis right now, and really recognizing we're both parents, Ed. We both have daughters with the same name, and recognize how that early education was such a critical piece for their development, turning into wonderful, successful young women.
Makes a lot of sense. Really appreciate being with us today, Meredith.
Thanks, Ed.
Remember, listeners, any questions at all, you can always feel free to give me a call at 518-255-8854. Any questions about your portfolio? Any questions about anything we talked about on the show? Thanks a lot, and thanks for being with us on Money Nation.